We had net 20,000 job gain. There's only about 5,000 of those were full-time jobs, and the others were part-time jobs. We still have this fundamental problem, which is we have huge supply of human resources because people are pouring into the province. Well, they're pouring into the country.
This is huge population growth, man. Like 4 to 5%, 3, 4, 5% is huge growth. We're talking 10, 15, 20% here. It's ridiculous.
So we know what makes the world go round, and that is jobs. And whether that's the real estate world, the retail world, it just doesn't matter. Economically, we got to have jobs. And what we're seeing is the unemployment rate going up. And what's interesting about all of this is that we are having challenges sorting through the data, because they say, well, we had net 20,000 job gain. And then when you unpack the numbers, you realize that, well, there's only about 5,000 of those were full-time jobs, and the others were part-time jobs. So it's really them painting a picture that makes it look better than it really is. So when we look at the job market, we have to look under and really kind of lift the hood on that, unpack it, get into the details. All to say this is that when we look at what's happening in Ontario, we see that economy right now from a jobs point of view is probably the worst within the country, within Canada, because of, again, when we look at what's happening specifically in Toronto, some of the GTA and the meltdown of that condo market. And meltdown is not an overstatement of what's happening in that condo market, by the way. So we're seeing the effect of that in Ontario. When we come over to British Columbia, we're starting to see it pick up. It's still under 6%, I think. What is BC?
5.8% in BC.
But that's an increase. Again, it's ticking up. And when you look at what's happening in Alberta, for example, which has got one of the strongest economies, what's interesting about that at 7.7% is that we are, in fact, seeing where it's difficult getting part-time service jobs. So it depends on, like, what are the jobs that are available. We still have this fundamental problem, which is we have huge supply of human resources because people are pouring into the province. Well, they're pouring into the country, but use Alberta as an example, and there's not enough jobs to go around. So when we look at what's going on in SMEs, they're not confident in what's happening economically. We look at interest rates, they're still high enough that they're not investing in their own infrastructure. They're not creating new jobs. So the problem that we've got on the HR side of things is we've got far more supply of people than we do demand from the job side of it, which is going to skew the numbers a little bit again. So you really have to pay attention to what's going on with the numbers. Again, kind of peel it back and see what's really going on. So none of it is great news, but it's also not as bad as the numbers would indicate.
Yeah, interesting, Patrick, that like you said, Alberta is actually in terms of like unemployment growing, they're the fastest of the big provinces, let's say. I mean, I'm not counting Newfoundland and stuff like that. They're in Nunavut, I'm not counting them. But, they're the fastest growing. And the reason, you just nailed it, but look at the growth, the percentage growth of the people coming into the city. I mean, listen, Cochrane and Airdrie, 30% growth in population is massive. And I can see why even Edmonton, which, like, listen, Edmonton is a multi-million person city. It's a big city. It's not like you're going from 100,000 to 130 or from 30,000 to 33,000. Edmonton's huge, and you're getting essentially a 13% growth in population, which is absolutely huge. And that's not helping the unemployment numbers in Alberta, that's for sure.
It's not. And it's also in the case of, Edmonton. We'll talk about Edmonton. I'm going to be there on the weekend speaking, but when you look at what's happening there, it's really crushing the infrastructure. They can't take it on. Edmonton's struggling because they've got all these infrastructure projects. They don't have enough money. Edmonton's really controversial right now with where they're at economically. All to say this, that we have a lot of people moving into the province of Alberta as an example, and we start to see that number one, they need a place to live. So if we're rental housing providers, that market's very, very good. And we see the opportunities. Affordability is the driver of this. And JG, back to some of the predictions that we made 4 and 5 years ago, we were talking about Alberta. We talked a lot about Calgary. We talked about Edmonton, people are going there. Why? Number one, you've got affordability. You don't have this. You have a better tax advantage because of provincial sales tax. So that's just to say a couple of things. You have jobs that are there, and quite frankly, you've got a better government leadership. Whether you believe in Danielle Smith or not, she's doing some great things. I don't want to be political about it, but ultimately, that's what people are attracted to.
Interesting, Patrick. And I'm just while we're talking about Alberta, and I look at the percentage growth of these cities. I mean, one of the things Alberta had a lot of pre-COVID and pre kind of ramp up we've had here in Alberta. Don't forget, it was 2020, March 2020. You and I were on stage in Calgary, Alberta, saying, "Don't worry." Of course, COVID wasn't a thing, or at least we didn't know what COVID was going to be at that time because it had just become a thing. But we didn't know a lot of the things we know now. Point is that we said, listen, don't worry, Alberta, you're almost out of your slump. You will get better. And we didn't know COVID would accelerate it in a big, big way. But one of the things Alberta has always had a lot of is inventory. It's had a lot of condos, as an example. A lot of stuff sits on the market, has sat on the market. Is all of that getting snapped up now? Like, are all the condos over there getting snapped up? I mean, this is huge population growth, man. Like, 4 to 5%, 3, 4, 5% is huge growth. We're talking 10, 15, 20% here. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, Calgary, of course, their condo market is being taken up. A lot of those condos, a lot of actually pre-built was having a lot of Ontario and BC money going into Calgary, into that condo market. I think that will set itself up to implode in about 4 or 5 years from now. You're going to be hearing a lot of stories. Having said that, when you look at affordability and that's on the investor side of it, by the way, Edmonton doesn't have that same degree of uptake on the investor side of it in the condo market because that condo market continues to be saturated. Having said that, you look at what's going on in Edmonton, JG. I was just talking to a realtor friend of mine the other day, and you can buy a nice, I don't want to qualify it. You can buy condos for 60 and 80 grand in Edmonton.
No.
Yes, and when you look at it, may not be the nicest place, but if you're looking to rent and you say the cost of rent versus the cost of having a place I can call my own, there is seeing some uptake in that market as well. So it's interesting that when you look at what's going on in Edmonton, all to say that we're starting to see exactly what happens historically, and that is that Edmonton follows Calgary 18 months to 2 years later, we start to see. And if you follow the charts, you're actually seeing that Edmonton, from a price point of view, a sales point of view, is starting to follow the path of Calgary, albeit a little different than it has in the past, but conditions are different as well.
Yeah, well, and time will tell. Time will tell.
So if you like these episodes and you want to learn more about what's going on with real estate in Canada, investing in real estate, and understanding how to invest in real estate the right way, head on down to the descriptions below. Follow those links.